Hi, I'm Kevin Judah, along with Afsheen Benab and Chris Jury, and welcome to this week's edition of the nation's capital sports show, where it's most definitely on. Gentlemen, let's start talking about what we enjoy talking about the best and the most, and that is local and national sports. Let's start locally talking about the Washington Nationals. They take flight against the Florida Marlins on April the 1st. No, I'm not kidding. April Fool's Day. In a game against, of course, the Florida Marlins to start off the 2013 season. We've got a couple storylines here. We're going to paint the picture of this and see how you guys agree with this and what you have to say about this. Will the Nationals win the World Series? Because apparently everyone has them winning the World Series, including Sports Illustrated. So I'm going to show this up to our viewers. I don't know if you can see that, but it says clearly it has Steven Strasburg on the front cover of that, and they said the Nationals will take it all. Will Bryce Harper get into a sophomore slump? And will they miss the services of Michael Morse, who is one of my favorite national players? He was traded during the offseason to the Seattle Marlins. He's doing good in terms of having a good postseason. And will Davey Johnson update his managerial posture by not appearing, as Chris once said on our show here, grandfather-like when it comes to making decisions in urgent and pressing game situations? And so now we begin to talk about our beloved Washington Nationals. Let's start up with Chris Jury, the man who has a lot to say.
Well, it's April Fools, as you say, and apparently there's no joke. Everybody's expecting the Nationals to win. I've heard projections to win as many as 100 games. So we'll see. I mean, I think on paper they definitely have the team, based on what they did last year, to go even farther this year. But it's a long season. You never know how these things work out.
Well, when we talk in terms of the pitching, do they have enough of it, Afsheen?
Well, they have 20-game winner Gio Gonzalez. Strasburg will come back, and you think he's going to play the whole season this time. And, of course, you've got Danny Herron, who they picked up. So they have a good starting five rotation along with a decent bullpen.
All right, so we talk about the bullpen. Let's talk a little bit about outfield in terms of the Nationals. How do you think they show up as compared to last year's team?
I honestly don't think they'll be as good outfield-wise. You mentioned Morse that you like. I really like Michael Morse, and I'm not sure that Denard Span is really going to be that much of an upgrade or not. Personally, I would have rather just seen them give an extended run to Roger Bernardina, but they didn't. But the acquiring of Span forces them to trade Michael Morse to the Seattle Mariners. So I don't like the outfield as much. I don't think there'll be as much production, but, you know, they're still solid.
I'm kind of curious, Afsheen, why is this year the year that all the sport pundits are saying, hey, it's now or never, World Series or not, for the Washington Nationals?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Davey Johnson is the one who got that ball rolling when he said World Series or bust. And a lot of people jumped on that bandwagon, including Sports Illustrated, Yahoo, and a whole lot of other publications. They did win 98 games last year, which was the most in Major League Baseball. They did win the National League East, and they almost made it to the NLCS. Unfortunately, for Game 5 against St. Louis, they didn't because of what happened in that game. But a lot of things are looking up, and like Chris said, on paper, they do look like they're very good. But it's a wait-and-see attitude in my mind.
That's right. We have a lot of teams that made some adjustments in the National League East, and one of those would be the Philadelphia Phillies, Chris.
The Phillies, I think, are going to be a team that I expect to bounce back. I think last year was an aberration. I don't think they're going to be as bad, and I expect them to be right in the hunt. I don't think this is going to be a given that the Nationals will win the East by any stretch. I think the Phillies and the Atlanta Braves will be right there.
All right, Afsheen, we're going to let you have the last word on this.
I completely agree with you, brother man. And I think not only the Philadelphia Phillies, with Chase Utley and Ryan Howard being at full health for the first time in about 2 or 3 years, but the Atlanta Braves are going to have a lot to say in what goes on in the National League East. They got the Upton brothers. And you talk about outfields, I think they have one of the best power-hitting outfields in Major League Baseball, though those guys can strike out. Atlanta will be in the hunt as well.
All right, thank you very much, Afsheen. Thank you very much. Chris, let's talk about those Washington Capitals. The whole team is back. Ovechkin has been playing some inspired play as of late. They just won the last game last night, I do believe. But the situation is they're a couple points behind. They're in last place, but it's doable, Afsheen.
It is doable. There's still, what, 12 or 13 games to go. They're 2 or 3 points now out of the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference, and that would be the New York Rangers. And then they can still catch the Winnipeg Jets in their own division, the Southeastern Division, where I think they're only 5 points out right now. The Capitals do it. They've got Brooks Laich back. They finally have Mike Green back, so they're healthier than they have been all season. All
right, thanks, Afsheen. We want to remind everyone that you're watching the Nation's Capital Sports Show here on AIM, and that's locally on Comcast 69 and Files 38. Chris.
I too think the Caps can do it, but you know they're so up and down. You know, like they go into Winnipeg, they win 2 games, they come off a 3-game winning streak on the road. They come and they play the New York Islanders, and then right away they lose to the Islanders. Then they lose again. They did, you know, just come up late with a win just the other day in Buffalo, but you know, they're just so inconsistent. I think they're going to have to really win their division in order to get in the playoffs. I don't like their chances of getting that 8th spot. I think they're going to have to win the division.
So we talk about this very shortened season, Afsheen. 13 games remaining. George McPhee, does he plan to make any changes before the trade deadline?
Well, there's only a day or 2 left before the trade deadline. I don't think he's going to make any moves. I think he's going to stick with what he's got because he's got a new coach and that new system, which they're still trying to get used to, some of these players.
All right, so do you give Coach Adam Oates the benefit of the doubt if they do not come close to making the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, Chris, what you think, but you got to give them the benefit of it. It's a 48-game season. They didn't have a chance to practice. They didn't have a chance to go through any of the routines that you normally would do in preseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you have to give them a chance. You know, the Capitals you can't keep firing coaches all the time. You know, this team will have had, if they made a change, they would have been now working on a 4th coach in less than 2 seasons. So I think you stick with Oatesy. And let's see what happens, and even if they don't make the playoffs, you give them another year.
Afsheen.
Yeah, well, you look what happened to the coach before Adam Oates, Dale Hunter, he's gone. But before Dale Hunter, Bruce Boudreau is in Anaheim, and they've got the 2nd best record in the National Hockey League.
Well, it's a matter of time, hopefully, before the Washington Capitals can continue on that road, and we hope them the best as they make the playoffs. That's my prediction, rocking the red right here on the nation's Capital Sports Show. We're going to take a little break. Coming up, we're going to talk more sports. What else? We're going to talk about the Washington Wizards and NCAA March Madness, take a few of your emails. This is the nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's always on the award-winning Stitcher Radio Network. Catch us on Stitcher.com. I'm Kevin Jeter, Afsheen Benab, and Chris Jerry. We'll be right back.
At Arlington Independent Media, volunteer producers of local television working together to bring the sights, sounds, people, places, and events of your community to you. Students of all ages and backgrounds learning the art and science of media production in hands-on workshops designed to empower and enable. Community leaders, friends, and neighbors gathering to discuss the critical issues that affect us all. More than 20,000 programs in the last 30 years produced by and for the Arlington community. A rich and diverse collection of independent voices building community. At Arlington Independent Media.
Hey, welcome back to this week's edition of the nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. We have Afsheen Benab, we have Chris Jerry, I'm Kevin Jeter. Let's continue our conversation and talking about sports. Let's talk about those Washington Wizards. John Wall has been stirring it up, so to speak. 42 points in one game, 22 assists in others. You got to like what you see so far.
Well, you know, on our last show, we talked about who was better at their position, Wall or Bradley Beal, and I said I like Beal much better. But since that time, Wall has really stepped up his game. No coincidence that it's a contract year and he wants a max contract. But yeah, I think over the last month he has played as one of the better guards in the NBA.
Afsheen.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. And you know, a lot of people will talk about how the Wizards, okay, when they're out of it, they're losing or they're winning, they're beating playoff caliber teams. That usually happens at the end of April when the season winds down. But this is a serious team with John Wall at the point guard position, and they're actually beating some legitimate teams, and they've had a winning record since John Wall has been back.
That's right. You got to like what you see. They've been actually pretty good and pretty solid in terms of getting the ball up the court, shooting jumpers in key segments of the game. And when you look at that, it's a good thing for all concerned. But when you talk in terms of John Wall, this is the season that he has to perform well in order to be considered for that huge contract at the end of the season. So my thought is, do you give this to him or not? Is he worth it? Could you call him the franchise player? Or do you give it to him because you have no other choice? You really don't have anyone, Chris.
You may not have any other choice. I can tell you that if I was Ted Leonsis and the owner, absolutely I would give him a contract, but I wouldn't give him a max contract. I think the thing the NBA teams, including the Wizards, got to learn is you really can hamstring yourself if you give these max contracts to play, even as good as Wall might be, because with the salary, the penalty on the tax that they charge you, I just don't know that I would be giving him a max contract. But you know, you got to do business the way you got to do business sometimes, Kevin.
Well, perhaps not give him everything that he wants, give him a little bit what he wants, and then you can still bring in a little bit more marquee players, provided that they do want to play for the Wizards, because we know that how that usually works out.
Well, that's something you have to convince John Wall that you're going to do, and then you have to follow through with it, just like with Kobe Bryant in LA and a lot of other stars on other teams. But if you can convince John Wall that you're going to do that, he won't take a max contract. And Chris has made a good point about the luxury tax, and I believe next year the luxury tax will even go up a little bit more than what it usually is. It was dollar for dollar. Now I think it's $1.50 per dollar that you go over the salary cap.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all works out in terms of the cohesiveness, in terms of Wall and the other key elements that the Wizards have. Are they close to having a winnable team to present to the NBA come next season? That's what usually fans want to know. It's like you have Wall here, but what else do you have in addition to Bill?
Yeah, you got a good mix of players. There's no doubt about it. You have the veterans mixed in with the younger players, but I think Wall is the future of the team. I think Bradley Beal is also the future of this team, and you're going to have to get somebody out of college or through free agency or something that's really can come into this organization and make a big move on the court and really show a dominant position. They need a big guy. I think that's what they need. They need a big man who can actually play and get rebounds.
Well, it's probably not going to happen with this next coming draft that's coming up for the Wizards. So what do? You have the same old, Chris?
I think you're just going to have to roll with Nene and guys like that. I tell you, you know, watching some college basketball, which we'll talk about a little later, I've not really seen anybody in college that looks like a future NBA All-Star. So the draft looks like it's going to be somewhat bare. So maybe you have to stay with some of the parts that you have now and move forward. But it's going to be interesting to see if they can build a playoff team. Again, as Afsheen mentioned, they have won more games with Wall. Since Wall's been back, they've been over 500, but will just barely be in 500 get you in the NBA playoffs?
No, not this year.
I don't think so. Not this year. No, not this year for the Washington Wizards or anyone else that's cellar dwellers in the NBA. Let's talk in terms of NCAA basketball. We do know that there is progress in the final games. Afsheen, take a minute to explain that to us, my dear sir.
Yes, sir. We have on one bracket now, we have Syracuse playing Michigan. That's half of one Final Four, half of the Final Four. And on the other side, Wichita State, the number 9 seed, Wichita State Shockers. They upset Ohio State, beat them pretty well, actually, and they made the Final Four. And they will await the winner of Duke-Louisville, which is going on as we speak.
That's right. Duke, Louisville, what team do you guys have?
Well, in my pool, I have Louisville. I want Duke to win because I'm an ACC homer. But I think Louisville probably, when we talked about this and the tournament started, I thought Louisville was the best team, and I picked them to win it. And I've seen nothing so far that would change my mind. I think they're the best team out there.
Afsheen.
Yeah, they are. I agree. Duke is the best team. I do think they have a pro player, but he's a guard, Peyton Siva. Not a big man, unfortunately. But Louisville is, I think, the best team in the tournament. And you know what? They've played better than anybody else in the tournament. Even my Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah. Good game. That was a good game. We saw that today.
It was. Michigan, they dominated Florida. Actually, I was surprised that they won by so much, and they dominated basically from the jump ball all the way to the final buzzer.
Yeah, it really has been a kind of yucky tournament because there's been so many blowouts. You know, that's the thing that surprised me is teams getting 15, 20-point leads, and it really hasn't been. We've had one overtime game so far in the tournament, and that's kind of unusual.
And a good thing about this is that we always have next year, but I'm not going to skip forward to that because we still have some more NCAA basketball playing to do. But in terms of the series on a whole, the tournament, let's talk about Georgetown. Georgetown, they took it on the chin.
Yeah,
Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
You know, so in the last 7 years, 5 of those years, they usually take it on the chin, have taken it on the chin in that first round, one and done.
Yeah, this year was a little worse than the other years, I think, because Georgetown came in as a number 2 seed. Florida Gulf Coast was a number 15 seed. Now, there have been 15s beating 2s in the past, but no one really expected Florida Gulf Coast to do this. But I also think that it may speak of the parity that we see more in the NCAAs, because even in previous broadcasts, we've talked about how there could be 10 to 15 teams that can win the NCAAs this year, whereas in the past you'd find 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that you knew were going to be in the Final Four. But Georgetown took a big hit on the chin this year with that loss to Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah, well, The thing is, luckily for Georgetown, Florida Gulf Coast went out and then won their next game.
Yeah.
And so now everybody's like, well, hey, maybe we underestimated these guys. But for Georgetown, you know, since getting to the Final Four in 2007, they've gone like now 5 straight years, and they've lost to teams, Kevin, that are like 5 below them in terms of seeding. So, you know, Georgetown has been favored to win. They haven't done it. And I think what that's done is that's going to start to put a little pressure on John Thompson III, because fans are starting to ask, like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, and as we've seen in this postseason, hey, coaches are getting fired for even getting to the NCAA, but not far.
Well, to that point, in terms of Coach John Thompson III, Afsheen, what do? Some people are calling for his head. Some people say, hey, that Princeton offense, that's not working. Some people are just saying, let's just can him. But obviously, to me, it seems like it may be much deeper than that. You know, you don't take the coach away, in my humble opinion, because that's not really going to solve the problem.
No, he's got a bunch of good players on that team, and they're young. This year, they were really a set of young players. Starks, and Porter is only a sophomore, I believe. So he had a young sophomore guard who's considered one of the best players in the country running the whole show for Georgetown. He's a sophomore or junior? Sophomore, right? So, you know, I'm not calling for his head.
So which brings me to my next question for you, Chris. Is the style of play for NCAA way different than what Georgetown does during the regular season? Because we know the Hoyas are ebullient during the course of the regular season, but when it comes to NCAA play, baby, they don't cut it.
Well, I think what the Hoyas have to do is they're always solid on defense, despite what happened in the Florida Gulf Coast game. Yeah. But just on the offense. But the thing about NCAA, you know, when you got a one-and-done situation, all you need is one bad game. You know, Florida Gulf Coast and Georgetown could play a best-of-7 series. I think Georgetown would probably win 6 out of 7.
I might even say they'd win 7 out of 7.
Yeah, but it's just that they caught Florida Gulf Coast in that one bad day, and you know, the rest is history. For people that are calling for John Thompson III's head, I mean, the guy has made it into the tournament. I think that's kind of absurd. The guy is there, but I think they will need to make a few changes because they need to do something to get their offense a little bit more up-tempo and not have to rely on their defense to get the offense started.
Yeah, I agree, too.
Yeah, the people who are calling for his head, just stop it. I mean, just stop it. It's ridiculous. It's inane. He's gotten them to the tournament, and, you know, it is a one-and-done, but he's going to have to probably show marked improvement. When you gentlemen agree next year, it's got to be, you get in the tournament, you got to win at least that first game, especially if you're going to be a top 5 seed again.
And the spotlight will be on Georgetown next year because in this newly reconfigured Big East, they will be considered the top dog with the Louisvilles and Syracuse's leaving. Georgetown will be the #1 dog in the Big East next year.
Speaking about teams making moves, George Mason, Atlantic 10.
Yeah, they move over from their old conference, and now they're going to be an Atlantic 10 member, which locally will be kind of nice because you'll have a rivalry, you'd think, with another local team, the George Washington Colonials. But you've got some good teams in the A10.
VCU, Temple, tougher teams. That's right. You're no longer going to be in Kansas, Dorothy.
Yeah, the A10 is a better league. Now, they, too, are losing some teams because of this realignment, which we've talked about before on the show. You know, Temple is leaving. You've got Butler, who's leaving. You know, St. Louis will probably leave next year. Maybe Dayton next year. You know. Even Richmond, you know, who's in the A10 now, they could leave next year. It's just really a mess right now. But in the new A10, George Mason will have to step up their game because there'll be more tougher teams to play than what's in the CAA now.
And as we talked about on previous broadcasts of this show, where you can catch us on the award-winning Stitcher Radio Network at StitcherRadio.com, we talked in terms of this is the way in which college basketball is going. The smaller teams are wanting a piece of that pie, and as a result, this is where you're going to go to. But when you do that, make sure you don't bite off more you can chew, more as you can chew, because you're going to end up with you know, a mediocre, talented team going into the Lions' den, and that's what Chris kind of alluded to.
Yeah, you're going to have that too in football as well. As you see, that's happening in football. It's happening in college basketball, and yeah, everyone wants a big piece of that pie, right? All
right. We're going to let you have the last word on that, and we have some emails. tncsportshow@gmail.com is our email address. We have 3 emails for you guys.
Oh, 3.
And so the first one comes from Carl Edwards of Arlington. So I'm going to have to read this, so excuse me. And Carlos' question is, do you guys think it's a bit premature for everyone to be calling for the Nationals to win the World Series? Now, he goes on to say, as a highly superstitious baseball and avid Nationals fan, he subscribes to the theory that saying such things may jinx our team. I just want our team to go out and play the game and have fun winning along the way. They should not have any added pressure from the press or even their general manager, Davey Johnson. Chris?
Well, as a guy who absolutely believes in jinx, I will say that I don't think it's asking too much, again, based on what they did last year. But, again, you know, each season is different, and you just never know. A lot of things that went their way last year, will they go this year? I mean, they got Strasburg back. Hopefully there's no injuries to any key players, and they'll be able to do it. But I don't think it's asking too much for the Nationals to go to the World Series, at least to the playoffs and get to the championship round.
Afsheen?
Well, the papers say they're going to the World Series, so I guess it must be true, Carl. But as long as there's no major injuries, I mean, last year Zimmerman had the injury. Last couple of years he's been injured. But as long as there's no major player on this team that has an extended time off due to injury, they have a shot to go to the World Series.
All right, before we get to the next question, did you guys want anything to elaborate on in terms of NCAA play?
No, I think we've said it all.
All right.
Go Blue.
All right, go Blue. All right, our next question is from Charlene Henry of Washington, D.C. I think we already answered this question, but I figured you may have something to add on to it.
Okay.
Nonetheless, Charlene wants to know, why does Georgetown continue to freeze up in March Madness play?
Go ahead, Chris.
Again, I mean, I just think it's, as we just
Give
said.
us a new answer, man.
Well, a new answer. Why do they continue to freeze up? Because it's cold when they play. I mean, no. I just think it's just, sometimes it's just a matter of style. I think that's just something that Georgetown's got to, the offense has got to come around, and I just think that sometimes playing that Princeton kind of rotation offense, it seems to have taken them out of the kind of running style. But, you know, maybe, who knows, next year, maybe things will be a little bit different.
You want to answer that question differently, or you just
Well,
fine with the
man,
answer that you gave? If you
you
find the answer you gave, we can move on to question number 3.
No, there's a couple points. There's a matter of style, right? But how many different styles have they played and lost to over the past few years? And also, I don't think they expected Florida Gulf Coast to actually run and do kind of a dunk city the way they did on Georgetown too. So, you know, it's the same old with the Hoyas. But next year they've got to do something better than this.
All right, and our final question comes from Don Adams of Greenbelt, Maryland. Fred Davis should be lucky and is very fortunate the Redskins decided to re-sign him. He could have ended up with Buffalo. What was the deal with Davis's posturing in the press with how he was going to seek revenge on the Redskins if he were not re-signed? Personally, I hope he's learned a lesson off the field by stop making questionable personal choices. We'll start with the non-Redskin fan first.
Go ahead.
And then we'll let you elaborate on that.
You know, I think Fred Davis is a fortunate player. The fact that, you know, he had the Achilles injury, and those are not the easiest injury to come back from. A lot of players' careers have ended. So, you know, he signed a one-year deal. Maybe a lot of what he was doing was posturing, because maybe he really wasn't going to get a deal from some of these other teams, and his agent made it seem that way. But I agree. I think that Fred is lucky to be there, and, you know, behave when you're on the roadways. No reason to be pulled over 29 times over 4 or 5
Yeah, what was
period.
up with that?
I mean, it's
you
just
know?
ridiculous.
And the allegedly funny cigarette smoking, but nonetheless, I digress.
I don't know. You know, he acts dopey sometimes,
And
but
Magic Dragon, or Fred the Magic Dragon. I digress, actually.
But you know what? I don't know if he got a deal from Buffalo or had a chance, but if he did have a chance, he would have made a lot more than what he got from the Redskins, and I think they made kind of a quieter deal themselves between Davis and the Redskins, where you look, come back for this year because, you know, our salary cap situation, we're $18 million in the hole right now. Let's see how it goes, and then we will reward you next year, provided there's no injuries and nothing bad off the field.
Right, and also they restructured some contracts to get him here too. He wasn't in the best light after the season or no season that he had and the history that he had. So, in my humble opinion, it's not like he had any other choice.
No, he's here.
All right. And so that takes us to the end of our show. But before we get out of here, we want to thank everyone for watching us, as always, on AIM, and that's
Absolutely.
Comcast 69 and Files 38, and also listening to us on the award-winning Stitcher Radio Network at StitcherRadio.com. And you can check us out on tncsportshow@gmail.com. Hit us a line on our email address, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. We have a lot of folks that we have to thank that make us look good, that make us sound good, and without them, we would just be mere amoebas. And that's the lowest thing in biology that you can be.
Thank you for that lesson today.
No problem. That comes courtesy of my niece.
Jeter.
That's right. She's in 10th grade.
But we want to thank Kimberly Phillip, Janar Stewart, Jackie Berries, Sally Gelastino, Misty Sweet, and of course, Devin Gallagher. And of course, Miss Berries made us look really good with her.
That's right.
Our makeup today. So I know she had to do it two or three times to me.
Sitting on these sweltering hot lights, and they make us look and sound good.
It's a great crew we have.
That's right. And we want to thank everybody on behalf of Afsheen Benab and Chris Duran and Kevin Jeter. We thank you for looking and listening to the nation's capital sports show, where it's always on. You go out, have yourself a very good week and a great sporting week, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.